I wanted to have a part 2 of listening um, and really sort of concentrating on the deeper meanings of listening and the skills that are involved in it. Listening isn't just getting another person's perspective. It's not just taking in somebody's ideas or somebody's story. Listening is opening yourself to that other in their fullness. Listening is entering into their world, but it's also entering into a shared world because you're opening yourself. So then their world becomes a shared world, and your world becomes a shared world. So listening to the other, to the you, is also listening to the us and to the self. It's opening to that place where we aren't separate. It's allowing in this expanded world. Jane used to call it the thickness of all of the us's, all of the worlds that each of us inhabit and are inhabited by. I want to share a quote with you from Carl Rogers. Isabel, do you have that on your screen? Can you read that quote for us?
To be with another in this emphatic way means that for the time being, you lay aside your own views and values in order to enter another's world without prejudice. In some sense, it means that you laid aside yourself. This can only be done by persons who are secure enough in themselves that they know they will not get lost in what may turn out to be the strange or bizarre world of the other, and that they can comfortably return to their own world when they wish. Perhaps this description makes clear that being emphatic is a complex, demanding, and strong, yet subtle and gentle way of being.
Rogers was setting straight people's ideas of empathy that thought that being empathic is sort of weak and like anything goes, and you're sort of uh, cajoling people and making everything okay. And Carl was saying it's a very strong, powerful way of being. It's gentle, but it necessitates this groundedness in one's own individuality in order to enter the world of the other and to enter the world of this shared us. Carl wasn't as attuned to, at least explicitly, to this relational field, to this us that we're attuning ourselves to, the big reservoir that we enter together. And he's thinking about it in terms of putting aside yourself to enter into the world, the reality of the other, and knowing that you could then come back to yourself. So there's some kind of risk there, the risk of letting yourself go in the moment that you're deeply listening, letting yourself go and knowing that you can come back to that self. It's not letting your whole self go. It's letting your little individual self go, because we are this much larger interconnected energy interaction, Jean tells us, with past and with future and with going way, way out. And when we're empathically listening, we don't let go of that large self, but we might let go of our opinions, our assumptions. We might let go of our own need to express ourselves in that moment, to put that down, not so far away that you're denying it. All of us have such a need to express ourselves, to tell our own truths, and to be really gotten. Kohut said that that's what's curative, is to feel deeply understood. And all of us have that need to be deeply understood, to be heard, and to speak our own lived experience. But we may put aside that need to speak or to be heard or to be understood just right next to us. I think many of you remember Jean's principle of psychotherapy. And those of you who know focusing oriented therapy will remember that Jean said that the main thing about being a therapist is that you put nothing between you and the client. He said, I have all my theories, I have all my experiences, I have all of my assumptions, I have all of my affiliations, I have all of my needs and desires. They don't go away, I don't push them away. They're right there and I can reach for them at any time. But I'm putting them right next to me so that there's nothing between me and the other. Of course, things come up that are between, right? One's own fears, one's own ideas, one's own needs. Of course, they come up, and we can gently put them down for a moment. One might ask, why would you want to put your own opinions, needs, assumptions? Why would you want to put them down to enter into the world of the other and the world of the us? Especially if you very much need to be heard yourself. Why would you want to put them down? Before I go into that question about why you would want to, I want to tell a story that I'm very fond of. Ruth, you know the story, and probably others of you do too. Jean said that he pictures everybody as these waiters at a sort of ritzy cocktail party, dressed in an uptight uniform, with these huge trays of delicate crystal, walking around this this dinner party or cocktail, looking for some place to put the tray down. I love that image. All of us are holding these trays of delicate crystal. We could bump into something and it all could be shattered at any moment. And we're so uncomfortable holding it. And we're looking for a place to put it down. And real listening is that experience of providing a place for someone to put their tray of crystal down where the crystal will be safe, and where the person carrying the tray can rest. It can be, the tray needs to also be appreciated, not only safe, but appreciated. And one of the images that I have is that, of course, the world is in such difficult straits, because if you picture everybody in the world carrying these trays of crystal, sort of crashing into each other with no place to put it down, it's not surprising that we have conflicts and polarities. And what the community is, a real listening community, is a place where all of us, not all at the same time, perhaps, but enough of us at the same time, can put our trays down, and the community is providing this place for our crystal to be safe and to be appreciated. Why would anybody want to put themselves aside in order to listen to another person, especially if they desperately need to be listened to and recognized? We can't always do that. If our need to be listened to and recognized, if we're triggered, if we're uncentered or vulnerable, we can't do that. We need to be listened to first. And that's where community life comes in, that the community can hold us so that there's enough people that can have nothing between and enter this broader world, while some people are struggling with their tray. We might want to listen. We might want to put ourselves aside to really listen, because that real listening is a practice of service and a practice of growth. It's a practice of service because when we can really listen that way, putting nothing between, when we can really listen that way, we're igniting a powerful process of becoming. And that's pretty damn inviting, that if I put myself aside for a moment, or I allow this larger to come in here, that's going to enable me to ignite this incredible force of becoming that includes me. It's not just that the other becomes, the other does become, and we see them moment by moment becoming more and more themselves. But ironically, when we can put ourselves down for a moment, we become more and more ourselves as we let another person's world enlarge our world. Another reason that we would want to do it is that Jean says, and I think I quoted this to you last week, but maybe I didn't last time, is that the miracle is that everyone, he said, everyone is beautiful, becomes beautiful when they're listened to. Isn't that an amazing statement? Everyone becomes beautiful when they're listened to. So if you are being annoyed by somebody, or you really don't like them, or you are having trouble with them, and you can get to the place of really listening in this kind of way, generative listening, I call it, responsive listening, that person is going to become beautiful. Isn't that amazing? I discovered this as a young therapist in my early 30s, when I was first studying with Jean and watching Jean making people beautiful as he listened to them. And I was very shy, but I would do presentations at large conferences with a big audience, and I would be listening to someone on the stage of this conference, this shy girl that I was. And I knew that all I needed to do, I didn't need to be smart, I didn't need to be dynamic, I didn't need to be charismatic. All I needed to do was really listen and enter the world of the other, and that this other would become beautiful. And when I did that, people were amazed. They were engaged. They said, wow, what did you do there? And people still will say that, oh, Lynn is so skilled. It isn't Lynn that's so skilled. Not that I don't have skill. Of course, I do after all these years, but it's not the skill. It's that process that we can all enter into, that miracle of the person becoming beautiful as they're listened to. That's one of the reasons we want to have these focusing conversations, that you can meet each other in a different way, because in these focusing conversations, we can all be ourselves there. I feel like when I'm listening to somebody, I'm being myself, even though I'm putting some aspect of myself aside. I'm being a deeper, truer, I wouldn't say deeper, truer, the little Lynn that I'm putting aside is deep and true also, right? But it's a maybe an expanded Lynn. We might want to do it because it's a powerful thing to do, and because we grow and because our world grows. How do we do it? How do we do it? Well, we enter into a space like Carl Rogers, describes, where we're putting nothing between us and the other person. We are also welcoming and engaging in this human way with another person, which feels wonderful to do. I mean, maybe that's another reason that we would want to do this, because it feels wonderful to do. When we enter into this space with another person, and we're welcoming of everything, even the things we don't like, and that's sort of the trick, is that you're putting something aside because you're wanting to welcome even the things that you don't like, because you're meeting the person on a level that is the level beneath agreeing and disagreeing, a level beneath liking and disliking. So you don't get snagged there, caught up with, I don't like this, I don't agree with this. That's irrelevant in that moment of meeting. What is relevant is that you're igniting a process, and that you're igniting and inviting a process that's going to move forward. And there are some basic skills, and many of you know these skills, and this will be like a little review. Others of you may not know these skills, and then I'm just giving you a little tiny introduction. One of the things is that you're listening not to the content, to the ideas, as much as you're listening to the person that's much larger than the content and the ideas and the circumstances and the views. You're listening to the music rather than to the notes. And when you're listening to the music, there's certain skills that are very concrete that I want to remind you of, that can really help you if you're struggling with it. One of the skills is that you're listening to what Jean called fire engine words. And they're words that carry a whole lot for the person. Instead of listening to the opinion, you're listening to these words. The word goes way down deep into something. And you're opening your ears and your heart to those words. And you're opening your ears and your heart to metaphor and to imagery. The person who's speaking may not recognize themselves what they're saying. They may not recognize themselves the deeper point that they're trying to make. But the metaphor, the image, the fire engine words are right on that borderline of the explicit and the implicit, right on that borderline of consciousness. So if you are listening there, or even asking the person, is there an image for that? Or what is that like? Or how is that? Those kinds of questions. Anne Weiser Cornell says we should steer away from questions, but these questions are questions that invite that line of going deeper. The other skill that I want to remind you of is paying very close attention to what Jean calls the spot. The spot is this place where the deeper is poking up, where the person is right there but hasn't entered yet. And it's the spot where we can feel the deeper will be. And it's a spot where if we pay attention to that place, to that moment, the person has this little shift and they are listening to themselves. They're getting it. It's like this deeper point, this deeper reality, this deeper truth is coming up. And sometimes you hear it before the person hears it. And you get to be sort of sensitive to that spot. And wow, when you get that spot, you're really happy. It's like, oh, Jean would say, oh, that made my job easy. Once you get to that spot, you know you're in the process, you're on a roll. It's going to just happen. And you don't have to work so hard after that when you get to that spot. And you feel it in your body, that place where you could just feel the truer truth poking up. The how is also concretely about reflecting, marking, flagging what the person is trying to get at rather than what they're actually saying. And if the person is saying things that you don't like and you're still trying to really listen in this way, you don't pay attention to whether you like it or you don't like it, but you're paying attention to what I call getting the ball in the basket. You're responding in such a way that the person feels deeply understood. You're getting your response to resonate with where the person is coming from. And that can be very satisfying, even if what the person is saying is something that you don't like. You say, oh, it's like that. The minute the person feels understood, oh, it's like that, you get it in a different way. I think those are the main things that I want to review about the how. And then I just want to tell you a little bit about where my hope comes from in doing this, in doing the listening. Steve and I had a focusing conversation this week. And in this conversation, what came up is how all of us are taking a big risk to be in a program like this, to listen to people whose ideas may be very different, or people who may be very different. And when we're taking that risk, there's this interweaving of hope and dread. And this is a psychoanalytic idea that all of us have what is called the hope for a new beginning. And it's usually an implicit or non-conscious hope that something is going to set things right, that the things that have gone wrong in our lives, the ways that we've been misunderstood, unheard, unaccepted, that it's going to go right. And we have that hope, like we enter this program and we say, oh, it's going to be uncomfortable in moments, and another Zoom meeting and all this time on a Wednesday night. But there's a hope this thing is going to set something right, and it's going to make a difference in a profound way. I'm going to learn something. I'm going to get something. At the same time, there's this dread to repeat. So there's the hope for a new beginning, and there's the dread to repeat. And the dread to repeat is, oh, I just knew it. It's going to be the same old thing. It's going to be like when I was a kid. I'm going to be misunderstood. I'm going to be rejected. I'm going to be ignored. I'm going to be used. I'm going to have to pay with my soul to belong here. I'm going to have to hide parts of myself. That's the dread to repeat. And this interweaving is very interesting. That dance of hope and dread that all of us engage in at moments we're sort of at the edge of our seat. And I'll just say one way that we can base our hope, the hope for a new beginning, that the process of being understood, of learning to hear ourselves, to accept ourselves as we hear others and accept others, that process of becoming is something that we can test at every moment. Not that it always works out, but we can feel the power of it. And that's something to rest our hope on. And not that we won't also be dealing with our dread, because of course we will. We'll always be taking those risks. But the more that we become familiar with the micro moments of this process of becoming, the more we'll be able to have that security that Carl Rogers talks about, to be able to know we can come back to ourselves after we've put ourselves aside.
Something that I'm just kind of thinking of and holding is I co-facilitate a group for BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color, service providers, and many of whom are service providers and are used to doing this kind of caretaking, or maybe come from experiences of trauma. And it just makes me think of, the kind of trauma response like fawning and appeasing and things like that, where you are sacrificing yourself or putting yourself aside in order to survive situations, and that it's more of a trauma and stress response.
Absolutely.
And when you're thinking of healing and getting to a place of resilience and that security in oneself, or even just the focusing process, how unsafe it could feel to kind of put oneself aside at that point. And I think even for me, I know that I think I'm only available for this process because I did focusing with myself and cultivated that presence and that listening presence within myself. So I just think about that, like what needs to happen to get someone to that point of being able to engage in that process of putting themselves aside, so that way putting themselves aside knowing that they can come back to themselves. What needs to be done to kind of create that possibility or make it feel safer.
Absolutely. That's such a wonderful point, Miko, because we don't want to confuse the way in which we enter into another person's world with what Bernie Branchev calls pathological accommodation, which is like a very early trauma response of giving yourself up in order to belong. And it has a very different feeling in oneself. When I'm putting myself aside out of just accommodating because I'm afraid of not belonging, there's a feeling of vacantness and this is just me. I mean, you might describe it a different way. When I'm entering into a process of listening, that is a process of empowering. It's empowering me too. And I feel the sense of empowerment in it. I mean, even when I was that young girl with those conferences, I felt the sense of empowerment there in the listening. But also, it can't it can never be one way. We need to be listened to. We need to be listening to ourselves. We need to be in a place where if we're not being listened to in that moment, there's a part of myself that's always paying attention to that little one that's right next to me that I put down for a moment. And when that little one, or maybe it's not a little one, maybe it's an angry one, or maybe it's a protesting one, needs attention, then I'm there to give that one attention. I'm always right there to pick that up again. And sometimes even in the dialogue, I might say to the other, I need a breath there. I need to take that in. I'm with my feeling of blah blah blah, and that needs to be said. And after saying that, now I can come back to you, but I need to say that for me. It's sort of like not leaving oneself out, but putting oneself down. I don't know if that distinction is quite easy, but it's a wonderful point, a very, very important, pivotal point.
Lynn, when you asked about why would we do this, there were so many other things that came to the surface for me. One was the fact that it's free. It allows you to be limitlessly generous and in this time of insecurity and everything, there's just something very liberating that there's something you can give that doesn't require outside systems or outside things. Then another reason that came up when you were asking that question was something about clearing space, both clearing space within, but then also by listening, you're clearing the space in the other for you. But in addition to that, if we are to take the perspective that we are interaction, then the act of listening is what allows that interaction to become more explicitly held for ourselves.
Those are wonderful points, and I love that part about being free, because it's being free, not only not costing money. And for us, we're very excited about having things that are free that aren't costing money, because that gives a whole other breadth to what we're doing. But it's also free in an emotional way, that we can be free when we're really listening. We're free of a lot. We're free to be a lot.
Shakafe, I was thinking maybe you've already made this point, but as you were talking, it dawned on me that I tend to treat myself the way I treat other people, the way I really treat them, the way I'm inside. And it helps me to be good to other people. It helps me find that for being good to myself. Maybe you were saying that. And the opposite is true too. How I am to myself, I am to other people.
It's also that when we're listening to the other, there's always a part of ourselves that we're listening to.
Yeah.
There's always a way where when you're deeply listening, there's always a way that, since we are the interaction, there's a way that we're listening to some part of ourselves as well, and making room for that.
Additionally, for me, I think Shakafe was sort of pointing for me. You were saying, Lynn, something about Rogers saying, there has to be an inner security in order to be able to put yourself down, to know you could come back. It's amazing to me that I can feel this in this group and on this screen, that there's something about trusting being held in a relational way, whether it's one other or this trust that I know something about this process, something is real there. And that helps to be able to let go of some part of the nervousness, the
Mhm.
pressure, to
Mhm.
release into something larger. Not pushing something away. It's almost like a decision somewhere of, I'm going to release this so that I can be this.
I know that feeling. I'm going to release this so I can be this.
This that then allows both of us to be part of, to be this us in this larger.
We are never doing this with our isolated selves. It's always in relation. So it's always a partnership. And in this community, it's always all of us that are engaged in listening. It's never, one of us who is on the spot or responsible, or that it's this whole system that's working together. And you're so attuned to that, Ruth. It's like hearing you about that.
And I think it's also, people are here for a reason. There's something important that is wanted for each person, and something of how we want the world to be, or how we're moving in some kind of evolving. And that is a foundational place.
I feel that we're all pulled in because of a shared need and want.
I'm part of a co-housing community, and last night we had a meeting to discuss potential members, and 3 out of the 4 everybody was fine with. But I really, several people were concerned about one person, and I also expressed that. I also said that I'd like us to pause, and maybe we can take some time and not have to make the decision tonight. And the facilitator started screaming, and it felt like she was screaming at me. And she said, you had the time to make the decision, to follow up and get to know this person better. We need to make a decision tonight. And you had and it was all these you messages. And I was just like stopped in my tracks. Like I didn't have any words. I didn't have any tools. I just felt, I felt humiliated. And so when you're with people who are not able to, have the tools to listen or to have empathy or whatever, it's like, this is a real life situation. And then afterward, I beat myself up that I should have spoken up, or I should have done something. And I didn't know what that something would have been in that moment.
Thank you for bringing that. One thing that comes to my mind is that what Nico said about how the difference between listening as an accommodation when you're just overwhelmed and you're going along with, and the listening that's really empowering. And so I was imagining, that in that moment, it was like your little kid was feeling very disempowered by her being triggered. If that bigger you could take on the listening the way a practice would be, it would be very empowering to say, wow, I see that my idea of pausing there really was really disturbing to you. And, where I'm coming from there is a tradition where pausing can make decisions much deeper. But for you, Jean would always say his view, but then go back to the other person. For you, it seems like we're just dawdling here, and we should have made this decision long ago. But the reflecting is very empowering. It's not giving up your power. And it's a wonderful example of that.
I just wanted to share a noticing for when Yoke was, sharing so tenderly. What I noticed was my listening was something that was happening to me as opposed to something that I was doing. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to bring that into it, that listening is not always just what you are doing, but it's also, there's something there, something about that my listening very distinctly changed when Yoke started speaking, and as she got further into her comments, it changed. It wasn't because I was doing anything differently. The other thing I was going to say was I was just sort of resonating with the felt sense from this session. I kind of felt like myself started to expand. And then I realized there was something not quite right about the way Carl Rogers terms about leaving the self behind and going somewhere else. It felt more right to me to say, that felt like a very unit model way of using language about what's happening. And it felt more right to say like, oh, we're going to leave all these concepts that are already explicit and that we know here and go travel to this edge of the self so that maybe it can expand into more self in this new way that I don't already have, but the concepts I already have. So, and it's all part of the self. There isn't leaving the self behind. And then, it's more like this weaving at the edge and that possibility for that new expansion of the self. So I just wanted to share that.
I think that's where Jean took Carl Rogers much further, that for Jean, it's not a division between the self and the other. We are this one interaction. So it's leaving one aspect of selfness and entering into this other aspect of the unknown and the surprising, being open to surprise of what you'll discover there in that larger realm. But I also wanted to comment on what you were saying about that it isn't something that we do, but something that we find ourselves, that we can enter into. That when you were listening to yoga, it didn't feel like you were doing something, but that it was happening to you. And I think
it felt like it was being pulled out of me, and it felt like this other aspect of listening. So it wasn't just me directing it outwards. It was sort of this, anyways.
Yeah, I really got that, and I felt that too, that it was something not that I was doing, but that something was happening to me in this listening field. And I think that this is a little simplistic, so forgive me, but Yoko was listening to herself, and then we were entering into a listening process already. And the opposite thing happens if someone is triggered and expressing something, discharging something that they aren't able to listen to themselves. There's something that the opposite thing happens where it's very hard to get in there because you feel repelled and you feel like you have to go against some instinct that would make you either counter the person or shut down or retaliate or fight back or something. So since we are interaction, it depends on the other person speaking and how they are with themselves of whether I can be some way. So the person in Melinda's story was engendering an interaction where Melinda had to shut down or fight. And it would take this extra thing to change the conversation, to change the feeling.
And to carry that forward even more, Lynn, I would say, when you want to be heard by someone else, knowing that you could influence their listening just by the way that you are listening to yourself and sharing from that place as well. So it's not just, there's something there too.
Yes, we need to go into that much more, not only our listening, but our listening to ourselves and our speaking from ourselves. Okay, if we're going to have time for a demo, I think we should start now. And I'm very interested in having a conversation with Flor because we haven't had a conversation before. But while I'm speaking to Flor, your job is not only to listen, but to sort of notice the places where there's a metaphor, an image, a pause, felt sense language, to notice what carries the conversation further. If there's a spot where you feel like, oh, this is what's there. You know, there's this moment of saying that. So just notice the details of our conversation. Okay? I'm so happy to have a couple of moments to get to know you a little bit because I haven't known you before.
Okay, yes, I'm happy to. And now everybody will hear that I have a voice.
Everybody will hear that you have a voice. Yes. In more ways than one, right?
Yeah, I hope. I was thinking that when I listen to somebody, I won't be the same person I was before listening.
Oh, yes, that's right. You won't be the same person as you were before you were listening. So you'll be changed. And I can already feel I'm not the same Lynn that I was before we started speaking a moment ago.
Something in me inside is feeling like touched and moved.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, as if I could cry.
Something wants to have a voice and to have an impact, and for me to be a different Lynn meeting you.
Did you say you need to be a different Lynn meeting me?
In meeting you, in
meeting me.
yes, in our meeting each other.
Okay. Yeah.
I feel good to stay with that feeling touched, feeling moved, and see what's there.
It's like something very fulfilling, like about like feeling like an intimacy and a connection.
What an amazing thing that we could have an intimacy and a connection after a couple of moments on a screen. But your face is so there, and you are so in your face, and I can so feel you through this screen.
Yeah. Even through the screen.
Yes.
And now that you say the screen, like I'm becoming aware of the lack of like the physical closeness and the physical connection. And I have like a place in me like with hunger for that.
Yes, yes.
Makes me very sad.
Sad, yes, 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 yes.
Yeah.
I feel that too. So sad that we can't touch, we can't be in a room together, that the hunger for just that embodied togetherness.
Yes, I'm like thinking today I had lots of moments during my day in which I realized how much I was missing my mother, that I cannot see her, like because of the COVID, and she's in another country.
Yeah.
I cannot go to that country. I cannot travel because that country won't let me in. And like too many months.
Oh, yeah.
Like, a too long time. Like I am surprised because it's not that I'm like extremely close to her, but it's being very hard.
Yes.
Like, for example, I would love to see her and hug her.
Yes, yes. To see her and hug her. And that's so much more primary than the close in a certain way, you know,
Mhm.
sort of
Yes.
more basic or something. You just want to see her and hug her.
Yeah.
And that surprises you.
Yes, I was surprised, like, about feeling that for her, because I have like a relation with her in which I can like be very, let's see the word, disattached in some way.
Disattached.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yes.
Yes. It's sad, and now I'm realizing that it also brings like a beautiful thing, like this longing, this wanting, like I could almost say this needing.
Yes. I really get that. That there's something that makes you smile about, there's something beautiful in the longing, in the wanting, in the needing when you're used to being disattached, unattached. And
Yeah.
then there's something that's welcome about that. It awakened that in you somehow.
Yes, it's the first time that I'm passing such a long time without seeing her, so many months.
And it brought this new beautiful thing that
Yeah.
you could feel the wanting, you could feel the longing, you could feel the needing that you
Hmm.
couldn't feel before. I'm appreciating how you're welcoming those feelings and receiving them, and like there's a bigger you that's smiling and saying, well, look at this, you know, we didn't expect this. Maybe this is an okay place to stop, although I know that there's so much more there about that. Like
Yeah.
just a little opening there, and there's so much more there about
Yeah. Yes, you're right. Yes, there's so much more. Hmm. Yes, and it's okay to stop here. Thank you.
I
Thank
feel like I got to know you a little bit, or in some way a lot. I don't know if you can really even measure how much you get to know somebody in real listening.
you. Mhm. Mhm.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Laura.
Thank you. Thank you.
I just want to say I want to thank Flor for taking on the invitation and allowing her voice to be heard, not just in this space, but it's my hope and aspiration that her voice will carry forward and resonate in every space in which you enter.
Thank you.
That's a lovely wish, Isabel.
Thank you. Thank you. How lovely. Amen.
I'm just seeing Flor even more beautiful than before.
Yes.
Welcoming the feeling of missing your mom just made you even more beautiful. Owning the moment.
I found it really courageous of you, Flor, to just to go do this and be so open. And what resonated with me was the word hunger. And hunger, and also then, yeah, hunger, I guess, having a big appetite to, like, you know, for, yeah, opening up and sharing and yeah, and noticing your feelings for your mother, and like the bad part that you can't see her, and the really good part that you feel, that you really feel connected to her. Yeah.
Thank you, Flor. I was very touched. And
what touched me especially was you're saying, what was it? The felt usually you're disattached. And I love that word, how you found that word. And surprised, I think, by the longing and the hunger. And I felt that was such a gift, a painful, tender gift to, to feel that, rather than, or maybe along with the disattached. Don't know. Thank you so much.
I want to also comment on, we're listening also to the details of the focusing conversation, that word disattached was like a fire engine word, right? Actually, all of those words, the longing, the hunger, and the need, that were juxtaposed with the disattached. And those words just go right into your soul. Could feel them.
What was really, what really touched me in your interaction with Lynn was actually quite early on, the word fulfilling. When you said fulfilling, it just kind of echoed into me. Just after a few minutes of experiencing the connection with Lynn and feeling that connection, that felt fulfilling. It was quite touching how quickly or how little it took to get there, and there was something about that.
Thank you. I love to hear you, because I had forgotten of that part that was the beginning. So now you bring it back and I feel it again. It's lovely. Thank you.
I feel very touched by this interaction, and something that's very early on that Flor said at the beginning, saying that I have a voice, that really, like, very early on from the beginning of the conversation, touched me. I think for me it's resonated something for me in me finding my voice. And I tend to be, like, in big groups, I tend to be a little bit shy and not finding my voice.
Flor helped you find your voice.
Yes, and yes.
Yep.
And thank you for that.
That's what struck me, really, was the very beginning, and how long the beginning was, and how quiet the beginning was. So for me, I noticed that Flor was physically moved just by enjoying the connection, the attention. You're training your being towards her, creating a kind of open space, and not it with content, just the possibility there hanging between the two.
Yeah.
Kind of amazing that it could happen like on Zoom. So much quiet was enjoyed, was allowed. And I think that really, honestly, that's like the essence of listening, pausing and waiting and being.
Yes, the speaking and the listening isn't always verbal. I mean, we're listening with our bodies and we're speaking with our bodies. And there's sometimes more said in the quiet than there is in the words. And I think we sort of know that.
I think it also showed how sacred a space it was. I was kind of sitting with, we were looking at Carl Rogers' quote about placing the self aside. I don't think you ever place yourself aside when you're actually listening to another person. The self is very present. I was reflecting on how Jean would speak of placing all of that stuff that's inside us down, But I notice myself in my own journey of listening over the years and its growth that there's a flow between the down and the up in me, back to the
Yeah,
down and the up in me.
yes, I
And,
like that, Derek. The down and the up in you.
and as I was listening and observing the interaction between yourself and Flora, I could feel that the down and the up in me again that happens, and about attuning to that within yourself, because that's the self that's interacting with the lived experience. It's a lived process. It's a living process unfolding.
Yes, yes.
And I was so touched by how in such a short space of time that the process is so sacred, you could get deep, meaningful connections, but deep in the body, from body to body. It just, and the stirrings and the movement and that. I think it takes courage to go inside, but I think it great courage to hold the space as well. I think there's the two sides to that.
In thinking about that, I think that what enabled me, and I think Flora maybe also, to be with just the moment, to not feel pressure to get somewhere or do something, or it was the sense of the group holding us, and the feeling that we could just be quiet in a moment and just look at each other and take each other in, or whatever was there was what we were paying attention to. We didn't have to make something comes. I love that idea in focusing that it comes. We're just receptive and it comes.
When you just said it comes, and I wondered, in order to be able to listen deeply, what is that quality of relationship or trust you have with that it comes?
If I could use an example, I hope Nor doesn't mind, but Nor and I had some listening space during the week, and I went inside not knowing what was going to come, but I trusted just that whatever would there would unfold, and it was quite powerful what came, and we stayed with it, and it was reflected so well. But the body itself brought it, and it brought elements of huge surprise, that I think it comes down to actually trusting that process when you go inside, that what your body needs in that given moment of pausing to go in without any fixed sense of, well, I'll be with this, I'll be with that. I actually went in just to be with whatever emerged, and it came itself. And even today, there was a carrying forward of that, because it was connected to a young person that I'm working with. And I was with that young person, and it came back into my body before I met them. What came in the session with Nor of what I needed to bring, even days later, the body retained it. And it came without me even tapping into it. It just emerged in me. And I think it's going with that flow that happens within us and attuning to it, and allowing that flow to have space, that the it emerges in that, is the only way I can describe it for me. And from that experience, that even days later, it would come freshly again in my body without me even consciously thinking of. My body brought it into my awareness.
Yes, that trust in the process, I think, also grows with experience. So the team wants to put in a plug. my inner team here is putting in a plug for, do your focusing partnerships, because that's where that confidence comes from, is that it's practice, seeing over and over that it comes, gives you practice. So in the difficult moments where you're worried about something precious being hurt in you, or you're worried about your confidence leaving you, or you're worried about your anger exploding, or that faith that it will come if we can trust the process, that is born of trying it out over and over. in all different situations. So the more different people that you listen and focus with, you know, that's all part of you then.
I would really like to go back to Miko's question about working with her group. How do we help others to get comfortable enough to be able to listen to others? What helped me in this group to get my ground back after feeling like I, you know, lost it, was I thought, okay, I need two things. I need to somehow talk with Lynn and have some connection there, because I didn't have one. Just to have that moment in presence with Lynn made a huge, you know, it's like I went from like, who are you, to, oh, I trust you. You know, it was just so simple. It was so simple. Connection with the teacher helped me a lot. And then I also felt very strongly that I wanted to somehow make a connection with someone else in the group that I felt I might easily make a connection with. You know, some go, okay, this one, you know, I don't think that one's going to work for me. So I made that connection, and indeed really helped me to feel my ground again. You know, so then I got, you know, this and being held in between.
This, and you were held in between.
Yeah, as soon as I felt that, you know, that connection and safety, and then I took your idea, Isabel, and I thought, of course, yes, I can do this. So I made contact with another person who I thought we had very differing views. And I'm going to say it was terrifying for me to work up the courage to do that. But suddenly it was there as soon as I had all that other 1, 2, 3 somehow.
You knew what you needed to sort of get to launch this journey of needing a connection with me and needing a pal, needing a friend, someone that you felt comfortable with, and then you could let in what Isabel said and actually even act on it. This will be our time together before the holidays and before the new year. So I wonder if for our closing, we might each have any word or words or phrase or image that comes to you that you would want to share.
My 2 words right now are appreciating and welcoming.
Blessings and peace.
Happy holidays.
Work in progress.
Warmth and connection.
Rooted listening.
Don't give up.
Owning the moment.
Seizing the day. Carpe diem.
Seizing the day, yes.
Openness and gratitude.
Hope for new beginnings.
Peace in the present.
I'm just thinking of a snowflake, the beautiful complexity of a snowflake.
My words are space and digestion.
Wait for it to come.
Courage and acceptance.
Trusting the process, moment by moment. It was so good to be with you tonight. Really so good to be with you.